Hey, welcome to our next Bible study. My name is Patty Baker, and if you're ready to dive into the ancient texts that have been collected and bound together in something we call the Bible, to learn from the spiritual journeys of others, get ready. Let's dive in and see what we've got for this study. We're in Acts 28. We're finishing up this book, and if you haven't been with us before, I'm going to give you a quick 2-minute overview of where we've been. We're studying the account of Paul's journey to Rome. He is a prisoner. Jews found him guilty of bringing somebody into the temple and blaspheming God. And so the Jews were like, hey, we don't want him here. And he was supposed to go before the Sanhedrin to talk to them. But guess what? Somebody got to Paul first and said, hey, if you agree to go do that, they've already got an ambush set up and you're going to be killed before you even get to them. So he went back to the centurion who's overseeing, his imprisonment and said, hey, I am a Roman and I'd like to go to Rome for my trial, which he is automatically given the opportunity to do that because he is a Roman citizen. So he pulled his card, the citizenship card, and he's off to Rome on a ship with some other prisoners. And Luke happens to join him. We don't know who else is there, but the book of Acts is written by Luke. And so now we're hearing the first account of what happens on this journey. And as they go from port to port around Greece on their way up to Rome, it's getting to be that time of year where you probably need to get off the sea because there are storms a-coming. And Paul warns the crew and everybody else this is coming, but hey, he's a prisoner. Shut up, bro. We got this. And then this huge nor'easter storm comes and blows them off course for a couple weeks. They think that they are going to die. The ship rudder has been kind of wrapped up with some rope. The sailors are doing the best they can. They've unloaded some cargo and thinking that, they're weighted down too much. But eventually they believe that there's no hope left to save them. And then there's this turning point, and Paul steps in, not as a prisoner, but as a leader. Go figure. But of course, Luke's writing this account. So of course, Paul always is appearing in that light. And he reminds them the truth that an angel had previously told him that he and everyone else was going to survive, this incident, this account. And, that they needed to eat and gain some strength in the middle of the storm. And so now at the end of the chapter of Acts 27, the ship runs aground and it breaks apart. It's actually hit a sandbar, exactly as God said that it would. Everybody survives. The soldiers then plan to kill the prisoners, but Paul is spared. And as a result, all of the rest of the prisoners. And so everyone makes it safely to shore. So that's where Acts 27 leaves us. The ship is gone. Everything that they depended on is gone. And now God's promise still stands that everyone is preserved. Now they are on an island, which is the island of Malta. And so that's where we start now. And in the last study, fear, we learned that fear will push you to protect yourself at the expense of others. And if you want to dive into what that looks like and see what that last study was in Acts 27, it's called Saving Yourself at the Cost of Others. May 2026, you can go over and check that out. Today, we are looking at Acts 28, like I said, the last chapter of this book, and we're going to look at the first 3 verses. It says, when we were all safe on land, we learned that the island was called Malta. It was raining and very cold, but the people who lived there were very good to us. They made us a fire and welcomed all of us. Paul gathered up a pile of sticks for the fire, and he was putting them on the fire when a poisonous snake came out because of the heat and bit him on the hand. We're going to leave the serpent until next time, but I wanted just to give the whole scripture verse there. Now, they just landed. they weren't even able to make it to this island via ship. They had to take scraps of the ship and paddle their way over there, or they were swimming themselves to get to shore. And it's one of the most traumatic experiences of their lives so far. For 2 weeks, they've been battling this storm, battered on the sea, deprived of sleep, unable to navigate the terrain, if you will. And they arrive wet, cold, exhausted, and they're displaced. And sometimes we think that once the storm ends, that everything should immediately feel better. Like, whew, that's over. But safe does not always mean comfortable, because sometimes we believe that we should, the storm in our life has ended, so we should feel peace and comfort and certainty and relief. And when it doesn't, we assume, well, something must be wrong. And so we become hypervigilant. And I want us to take a look at this text closely, because it says they were safe, but they were still cold and wet and exhausted. We might be out of the storm, but we're not out of the suffering. There's collateral issues on the other side of the storm ending. Whatever war or battle or storm that you're facing, once it's over, there's collateral issues that need to be addressed. And sometimes I think we say, if God brought me through this storm, then everything should be great now. No, you survived the storm. Now you must recover from it. So don't be so quick to move away from the storm ending and think, oh, everything should be okay. And if you're somebody who has seen someone come through a storm, maybe they battled with their spouse who had a disease or an illness or a condition that now they've passed. Well, there might be some relief in that because they've cared for them for so long, but it's also a recovery time for them too. And so we need to honor the season that we're in. Just because the storm's over doesn't mean that there's nothing to recover from and that everything's great, peaceful, and tranquil and in the midst of the storm ending. The question now is, how do you recover from something like this? We have a choice, actually, don't we always? And it's a free will choice. And this account does not come about with just trauma or analysis paralysis. It becomes about thinking forward and taking a step forward. Because these people have been 2+ weeks on a ship that they didn't even think was going to make it. They landed on a sandbar or a rock, thinking they were going to make it to the shore that they saw, and they didn't. And then they had to swim over there. It's still raining. It's cold. They're exhausted. They've entered land. This doesn't mean they were unaffected by what happened, but it does mean that don't build your identity in what happened. Part of the recovery is moving forward. And you can't remain emotionally camped out in trauma and fear and at the site of this shipwreck and building an altar around it. Acts 28 shows us that it's good to acknowledge the storm. There's nothing wrong with that. It's good to acknowledge loss. Nothing wrong with that. And it's definitely good to acknowledge your exhaustion in it. Really, it is. And that doesn't mean that we have to stall out there. We're called to keep moving, no matter how small those steps are. The storm is real. The trauma is real. But are you going to be a victim or are you going to be victorious? And I think the lesson here is not to pretend that nothing happened, because it did. But don't stay psychologically submerged under the trauma after reaching your shore. And I believe that this account shows us that we should respond to reality instead of resisting it, being in denial, or ruminating on it, that whole analysis paralysis. The people of Malta. We find out very quickly they're kind, good people, and they show great hospitality towards these shipwrecked people that have landed on their shore. In the King James Version, I read from the International Children's Book, but if you read the King James Version, it says barbarous people. Barbarous does not mean that they were a savage group. This barbarous comes from the root word, which means foreign. So they either were speaking another language, so they couldn't speak the same language, but it doesn't necessarily always mean hostile. It's where we get the root word, it's where we get the Latin or the Greek is where the word we use for barbarous comes from. But in this context, these are not barbarous people at all, as we can see from the writings. These people are very kind-hearted, they're good to everyone, and they're curious, and they're hospitable. So we see them as people who didn't speak the language, I'm sure. The same language, anyway, that those on the ship did. And when you really stop to think about the fact that the Maltans had a choice on how they were going to welcome these people, these foreigners who've come upon their land, it's quite remarkable, because there's 276 vulnerable strangers who wash up onto this island. They're cold, they're weak, they're disoriented, they're exhausted, and they've got nothing, absolutely nothing. So they're in a position of vulnerability. And the Maltans could have taken advantage of them very quickly. They could have rejected them. They could have exploited them. They could have enslaved them. They could have killed them. But instead, they showed kindness. And that's not a small statement for Luke to have written that, because power reveals character. How do you use your power? Misuse of power says a lot about character. How do you use that power to control and manipulate and triangulate? It says a lot about character. How do you use your power with vulnerable people? When you have the ability, but you don't. Or your kindness and generosity come from a place of love, not power. And we can see that with the Maltans here. They saw these strangers emotionally vulnerable, financially desperate. They had nothing. They were grieving. They were inexperienced. They were socially isolated. They were recovering from a huge failure, and they were dependent upon help. You can't get on shore, get a good signal, and call somebody. In those moments, people who have the upper hand, who have power, how do they use it? Will I use this person's weakness for my own personal gain, in other words? Or will I come with love and have goodness and mercy? Ask that in your relationships. When you have power over your children, your family, your home, your workplace, the school, your community, neighborhood, how are you using your words and actions? Is it coming from a place of power and you are enslaving and exploiting people? Are you coming from a place of love where you're coming with kindness and generosity and hospitality and help? Really says a lot about who we are as individuals based upon how we respond to people in given situations. Some people see others who are vulnerable as an opportunity for control, while others see the same people and situation as an opportunity for compassion. And I believe in this account, the Maltons remind us that civilization and morality are revealed in how we treat people who cannot repay us, and are also in no position to defend themselves. They, the Maltons, chose to respond to these 276 strangers with kindness. So there's another side to this too, right? They were showing kindness. But then how are these strangers, how are these people on the ship, the prisoners, the soldiers, the sailors, the crew, right? How passengers, how's everybody going to respond to this welcoming? Are they afraid? How do you respond? They're survivors, and they still had to discern the moment without assuming hostility. But they needed to be prepared for it because they don't know where the shore is that they're walking into. And I think after something this traumatic, they could have arrived hypervigilant, paranoid, aggressive, defensive, and suspicious of everyone and everything on shore. But instead, there was an openness to receive the kindness. Again, they're desperate, they're vulnerable, they've got nothing. But they could have already started battling, and they didn't. They instead were open to receive kindness. And that balance matters. It's one thing when you roll up on a stranger and you're like, okay, use discernment. Are they trying to exploit me here? Or are they offering kindness and paying it forward, as we say in our society, right? Not everyone is out to destroy us. And not every unfamiliar place is dangerous. And not every stranger is an enemy. Wisdom discerns the danger, and fear assumes it's everywhere. So Acts 28 shows both the goodness that can still come with humanity, it still exists, and the importance of responding rightly when kindness is being offered. I think so oftentimes we don't want to owe anybody anything. So when kindness is being extended, no, I'm good, because I don't want to owe you. I don't want to become vulnerable. But if somebody's coming out of kindness, can we not just receive? Respond rightly to kindness. Because not only do you gift them by receiving, but also you're being blessed yourself. Don't turn away that blessing. So not only did the people on the ship that we've been watching for the last couple of chapters come into a foreign environment for themselves in a vulnerable, cold, exhausted state, but they also received, now you could say, well, hey, hell, they didn't have a choice. They're going to die. They ain't got nothing to live with, live on, nothing. They're too exhausted to fight anyway. But they didn't just lay down and receive like as if they were entitled. They didn't use their citizenship in some foreign land. They didn't use the fact that they had survived so much that they should be, have accolades. They didn't see that this was a lesser people group for them to try and strengthen up to take over. They were good guests. And so when someone receives you into their home, into their workplace, into their life, be a good guest. In your romantic relationships, be a good guest. If someone invites you into their heart, be a good guest. Be a good guest. When somebody invites you into their physical home or their metaphoric home, like I just said, metaphorically your heart, be a good guest. Because you noticed here that the survivors just didn't become passive and sit around and wait to be cared for. Paul didn't just sit beside the fire and wait to be waited on hand and foot. He gathered sticks. Now, of course, Luke is writing this. Luke always puts Paul up front and center. He's the leader. He's the best. He's everything. I would venture to say that there were other people helping too, as they were physically able to do so, to gather sticks for the fire. And that matters. You know, there's a difference between receiving kindness and surrendering to your responsibility in it. Oftentimes, people will say, oh, thank you so much. I'll definitely pay it forward, right? And then you'll do it next time. And they say, oh, no, please. And they go, no, I'm just paying it forward. And they were like, oh, okay. And they gladly receive it, right? And so I've noticed that, I don't know if you have this store in your area, but it's called Aldi. And I've been shopping there for, gosh, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 years. And I just love being able to go there and it costs $0.25 for you to put in the shopping cart, because the point is that you'll put the shopping cart back, lock it up in order to get your quarter back. And it helps with the cost of this store, and it keeps the food costs and everything lower on the inside, because they don't need attendants in the parking lot keeping it clean. And I have noticed nearly every time I've gone to the store there, that someone is either handing off their cart to someone else or leaving $0.25 in it for the next person. And so really nobody ever has to put out any money, because the kindness and the responsibility to put it back is built into humanity, or to the customers, right, who go to Aldi. I know that has nothing to do with survivors who are everything they've got to rely on these people. But how you receive kindness is one thing, but how you are surrendering responsibly to it is another. It's not out of a place of entitlement. It's out of a place of vulnerability and gratitude, thanksgiving. And the people in Malta helped to create the warmth, but the survivors still participated in their own recovery, because they didn't just arrive with this attitude, right? That, hey, we suffered, and therefore everybody else must carry us until we feel better, because we've been through a lot and we're entitled. There's no badge of honor in that. Instead, they partnered with the people in gratitude by offering to help in the kindness that was being offered. And there's maturity in that reciprocity. And sometimes after hardship, people can drift into this learned state of helplessness, and where they expect others to emotionally, financially, spiritually, practically care for them and sustain them indefinitely. But Acts 28 shows that there's dignity in receiving the kindness and also contributing, even after trauma, which we can see here. So as we wrap up, I like to sometimes give some questions for us that we can sit with, meditate on, journal, just contemplate and put some thought behind it on how we can take the text, the ancient text, and lay that over our lives for today. So after a difficult season, are you willing to acknowledge the hardship you've been through without building your identity around it? Something we learned today is this isn't a place to build an altar and worship yourself on. Everyone has their own traumas, but it's not for us to stay in it. The next question for thought is, do you expect immediate comfort instead of accepting that there's a process of recovery? I am so guilty of this because I feel like I just went through that horrific thing. What's the next thing? We just keep moving. I can compartmentalize that and move on. And I'm really good at compartmentalizing. So here's this issue, no problem, compartmentalize it, let's just move on. But at some point you got to unpack your shit. And you got to say, okay, where I need to acknowledge that was a hard season. I need to acknowledge that's a difficult time and that I might not be able to do as much right now. I might need to set aside time to process. I might need to rebudget my money because of this thing that happened in my life. I'm gonna need that time to process. So there is a process of recovery. Accept that process, because if you don't, and you just keep compartmentalizing or denying it, that will come out sideways later when it's triggered by another event or sideways on other people. Another question that's food for thought is, do you know how to receive kindness without becoming dependent on others to carry you? That's a hard one. Are you relying on a system or on people and they have extended kindness to you, but it's not indefinite? What are you doing to be responsible? Somebody's allowed you to stay at their house while you're going through a difficult time. Do you just stay there indefinitely? Make sure to show up at the dinner table, but you're not doing anything to clean up. I think at some point, even as children, as we age, that we need to be grateful and thankful for our parents and the things that they're doing, and to the extent that we're able to help around the house. Can you set the table? Can you clean up? Can you do your own laundry? Can you be responsible for the things that you need to be responsible for, rather than just laying around? My dad would call it hog wallowing. If you see hogs or pigs in their stalls, they wallow in the mud and just kind of lay there. And my dad would say, do not hog waller. So are you hog wallowing in the kindness that's been extended to you? And as a result, you're disrespecting the people who've been showing kindness to you? Have past storms in your life made you so guarded now that you struggle to recognize genuine kindness when it appears? And lastly, when you hold power, and we all do in different situations, when you hold power, hold advantage over, or have influence over vulnerable people, do you respond with compassion or control? How have you done that in the past? How are you doing that now? How can you keep from doing that in the future? Next time, we're going to look at those next few verses. We've already given a little insight. We'll continue on in Acts 28, verse 3, where Paul, as he's putting the sticks on this fire, one of the sticks, as it's heating up, a snake comes out and it bites him. So we're going to see that when Paul is bitten by this viper, this snake, right after surviving this storm, how quickly people can misjudge you based upon circumstances, assumptions, and appearances. May the truth that we learned today soften your heart, feed your spirit, renew your mind, and guide your steps. And until we meet again next time, keep seeking, keep listening, and keep growing. Keep walking in the light of love.